this is how we left it last time. The cabinets are now ready and it's time to build the windows and the views from the windows so that we can throw ourselves in countryside mid-century Japan. The first thing to do is to build the window frames, or better the walls onto which the windows are built, and this is made with moisture resistant MDF, and boringly enough I'm just cutting a square out of it for one window while the other one will be round. This is actually something quite interesting. While I was researching shapes and images, I stumbled into an article that explained me something that I didn't know, which is that most windows in Japanese traditional houses, at least, have either a meaning or a name, and you will often find a square and a round window, where the round window represents the perfection and the harmony of nature, while the square window with its four corners represents the four strains of human life. So one is nature and the other one is humans, essentially, and this was the key into which I decided to shape the landscape, the view that I would see from my window. Now, I thought about building a proper jig for cutting circles with the router, but at this point I don't have any project that really requires me to cut many circles, so I didn't want to waste a lot of time engineering a tool, and I didn't want to buy one either, and therefore I just picked a piece of MDF with a pin in the middle, took some reference, and there you go. I'm just drilling as deep as I dare and finishing it off with a jigsaw. And all it takes now is a bit of a width with a flush cutter, and to finishing it off and having a perfectly nice clean edge, and I can now paint them with some MDF primer. The actual paint will be the same paint that I'm using on the walls, so it will look like a wall eventually. For the moment I'm just preparing the surface. The next stage required me some good degree of improvisation. I decided to cut the circular frame into 8 quarters. They are identical, I just got 2 jigs because it was quicker to place them on. I'm cutting them on the bandsaw as close as I dare, as I've been recommended to do, and then I will pass them on the router. And well, this first stage didn't really go very well, because the routing, my original idea for the routing at least, was to create a very thin frame and dig it as much as I could with the router table. So here I'm just cleaning up the outer shape, but the following step will be to actually carve some channels, as you can see here, and this will remove as much material as I deemed safe to do on the router table, and then I'm finishing off the rest with a handsaw. To be honest, I did find quite a lot of problems in doing so. The surface was very uneven, and the edges were not quite clean, or as clean as I wanted to. So after doing the first one and seeing how much work it was going to require me to do all of them, and the quality of the result, I changed my plan completely. So I stuck together with some double-sided 2 of the profiles, and I simply used a rebate cutter to create a small edge on the outer side. This meant that my original circle diameter is now greatly reduced, but it's not really affecting my plan because I can just adjust the rest of the components to fit, and it's actually probably better because, being a fake view, the bigger the window, the more I could risk to see the fake edges of the fake landscape. Did I say fake quite a lot of times? Anyway, I was really happy with this plan, and therefore I used the same for the square window. To glue the arches together, I decided that the best jig was going to be the actual wall they're meant to fit into. This is giving me the opportunity to check that the angles are correct, make some adjustment, which eventually it was required, and I'm just gluing the pieces one to the other rather than gluing them to the wall itself, so I will still be able to pull the circle out for the finishing and the final sanding. As you can probably see, the first piece I made with the hacksaw had to be redone, and that came from a different stock, so the grain is quite different, but I can probably live with that because, well, I mean, I'm living with a lot of stuff on this project, but I'm just pulling through, and eventually the circle is done, so it's time to focus on the square window, which will have mitre corners, but other than that is much more straightforward and easy. The plan for these windows is to have a traditional Japanese paper shutter or mobile walls. I'm not quite sure what the technical name is. And these will be half open, and for the actual opening will be much smaller. And for this I need to build 4 frames, 2 for each window, and that was quite a lot of work, and as you will see here, it didn't take me long to find out that I couldn't take shortcuts and just stick them together with a bread nail, because that really didn't work. And therefore I indulged myself into actually making mortise and tenons. I'm just using the thickness of the blade, so I'm not really making it in a proper way, but these are very, very small frames, so it will work perfectly for what I need, and it was just a bit more work, but not that much, to be honest. Eventually it was really worth the effort. I need to ask you to bear with me, because from now on there will be a lot of time lapses. It's just that there is going to be on this project so many long tasks that either I show you very little of it and not giving you the whole idea of what is required, or I just move forward at a fast pace. So after the frames were done, as you can see, I need to cut a zillion little strips, and then I will have to cut notches into it so they can interlock into each other. So that's gonna take some time, isn't it? Once all the strips were done, I cut them to length and I divided them in 2 different kinds for 2 different functions and different paces, and then I packed them together with some masking tape. In this way I can cut the slots on them all at once, and I'm just made a small jig with a little pin that allows me to space them correctly. So this process was actually quite smooth, and once everything was done, it was just like building Lego bricks and putting them together. I mean, it took some fiddling because some of the pieces were not quite perfect, but no, it didn't take too long. Actually, I'm quite happy the way this worked out. Now, one issue that I did find with making these little frames is that the thicknesser only goes down to probably 5 mil, so I couldn't use it to make the strips because they would have been too chunky, and therefore I decided to go for 3 mil because that's the thickness of the blade on my table saw, which meant that I was able to cut the notches all in one pass instead of making it a lot more laborious. So it all worked out together eventually, but I had to adjust my plan based on the tools I have, and that's something that needs to be kept in consideration, because a lot of times when we do custom furniture we think we can do anything, and then we eventually stumble onto factory settings that are standards that we are not accustomed to, and that's a dead end really. And it's now time to do the usual stuff, a bit of sanding, a bit of staining and oiling. I won't see much of these frames because they will be mostly concealed by the windows, but I'm nevertheless finishing the whole thing because this will give me flexibility to orient them and place them appropriately based on what I can actually see of the landscape through the opening. Because I mean, obviously I have edges that are not quite finished and I don't want people to be able to see them. Now this is the next stage, which is where I apply the paper. The paper is actually the proper paper, the proper Japanese paper that they actually use to make this window cladding thingy. The glue is not. The glue is just PVA. Because yeah, I didn't really want to commit to make the real thing because everything is fake in this project. Did I say that it's all fake in this project? Yeah, everything is fake, so I'm using the fake glue to stick the real paper on the window frames. That's how they look from the other side, the side that will actually be inside. I just need to clean a little bit of excess glue, and this is all done and dusted. And this is where the actual fun begins, at least for me, being a model maker. Where there's a window, I also need to build a view. And for this reason, I ordered a large sheet of 3 mil acrylic, and I laser cut the tops and bottom because they have a bit of a peculiar shape, based on the fact that I want to create a sort of a forced perspective. I probably need to specify that at this stage I was so tired that I didn't really want to sit in front of a computer engineering a perfect forced perspective, so I'm going to be totally winging it and just let my muscle memory build the things for me and have fun with it. Just roll it, roll and roll. The nice thing about working with acrylic is that the gluing it is very easy and very clean as a process. The acrylic cement is very fluid, and you just touch with the brush on the joint and it soaks in, and then it melts the acrylic into one piece, creating a very solid joint. And with the box ready, it's time to start working on my first landscape. This is the nature landscape. So I'm using black foam, is the one that they use for ponds. So it's actually animal safe, but there won't be any animals on this particular project. But it is the same that I use for my terrarium build, which you may have seen in my other video. That was my very first project and my very first terrarium. So this is my second terrarium build, although it's going to be not very real. But once the foam is all firm and dry, and you really need to wait at least 1 day, better two, because if you have a big mass, you may find soft blobs in between, and those will stick to pretty much everything. But yeah, once it's all dry, it's time to carve it with a knife to give a bit of a rocky shape. The purpose of this stage is not only to sculpt it, but also to get rid of all the shiny bits, because those will look very unnatural. So once all of that is done, I'm just giving it a bit of a whiff with a black spray paint in the deepest parts, and that will add depth and will give a sense of a bigger scale. I need to say and be very clear that all that you see me using in this video is not meant to be used for real plants and animals, because it will be very harmful. This is a model, this is a fake terrarium. So what you're seeing now is I'm painting everything with PVA, and then I'm sprinkling coconut fiber, and then I'm using some spray mount and sprinkling some green flock. Just to give it a bit of a hue, and at this stage everything looks a bit dull, but it does look earthy and it does look mossy. So I can now get some branches from my garden and convert them into full grown up trees, and from now on it will be just adding stuff until I'm happy that I created enough layering to look like a natural full grown landscape. It's going to be a proper forest. What I'm doing now is just a few balls of coarse steel wool. I'm painting black as well for the same reason as before. I don't want things to shine through with unnatural colors, and I spray them with spray mount and then pass them into the green flock, so they become moss balls. And now the proper messy fun can begin. I got some aquarium plants, some plastic aquarium plants, and I broke them down in small pieces, and I started adding layers after layers after layers of vegetation and more flock and different colors flocks, until I was perfectly happy that it looked very natural and very realistic, at which point I could finally unmask the acrylic and spray some frosting, so I can't actually see what's behind the terrarium, which is a wall and a PVC window. And it wouldn't be a proper Japanese forest if it didn't have some kodamas. For those of you who are not familiar, kodamas are tree spirits, and these particular ones are how they can be seen in Princess Mononoke, which is an old animation movie by Master Miyazaki, of which I'm a big fan. And it's time to start the second landscape. This is the one that goes behind the square window, which is the human themed one, and for this reason it's going to be a Japanese garden, and it will be as if I'm inside the house looking outside, so I will see the wings of the house and then go into the garden. This is where I'm winging the first perspective the most. I'm just using cardboard to cut the shapes and small sticks and jigs just to get everything in a sort of a fake forced perspective. I'm finding preposterous perspective points, and I'm translating all the jigs into 6mm MDF, which will then be glued in place. So I start using masking tape in order to define the lines, and then I'm following those lines with sticks and pieces of MDF to build the actual hard landscape. So as you can see, I'm using my hands a lot to figure things out and think it through, and then all these strips of tapes will eventually be substituted by a structure onto which I can stick the correct and final elements. I'm rushing through this in the video because, as I said, I'm totally making everything up. It will look like a perspective, but there's nothing that I can really teach you about this process because it's completely handmade and there's absolutely no geometrical rigor into what I'm doing. I'm just hoping it will come together. As you can see, this is the alfresco portico area, and I just found a perspective line, and this will give me a reference to build the decking. And to prove how made up the whole thing is, I just used the axle as a square and found the perpendicular, and now I'm using a 45 square to find what would be the perpendicular point of the perspective if this was a proper perspective, but it wasn't, and the angle was completely bonkers. So I am making it by eye, and I'm finding my perpendicular decking lines just as it looks more realistic. And then I'm using the strips that I used to create the fixed perspective to make the actual cladding and the deck boards. Now I'm not doing individual boards, I'm going in group of trees, but what I'm doing is I'm changing the orientation of the grain so that every three deck boards the grain will go in the right direction compared to the fake perspective, if I'm making sense. And once everything is in place, I will score the lines that separate the decking boards. It will make more sense later when you can actually see what I'm doing, because the light is pretty much washing everything out, but once I stain it, you will be able to see the lines better. And now you can probably see what I mean. All the lines are converging to an hypothetical point of perspective, but the grain is also following in the same direction, more or less. Now it's time for a bit more lumpy landscape. This was very lumpy and it actually stayed fresh inside for 2 days, so I got it all over my hands, but I didn't show you on camera. And now it's time to build the wings of the house, and the process is exactly the same, building the shape with strips of cardboard and then translating it into MDF. So the top and the bottom of these walls will have timber cladding, while in the middle there will be a paper window, just the same as the ones I've done for the front. So I draw some fake perspective lines again, and there will be some tiny frame and paper, the actual same paper will be cladding the MDF. Once the walls were done, I had to do the roofs, and for that I had to use the window in order to decide how much of it I had to show in order to conceal the parts that I don't want to see, like the edges of the acrylic box. I gave it a bit of a stain. This is a much darker stain, so it's in contrast with the cladding of the walls. And now it's time for some flocking and some landscaping. Originally I had the idea to create a flat surface where a pond or a zen garden would be, but I changed my mind. I just went for rocks and plants, and yeah, it worked out quite nicely. And it's now time to pop them in place, push them in, get the wall, and enjoy my new view. As you can see, I'm using the frames to conceal everything that I don't want to see. In particular, on this side, I got the column, so that's an exposed piece of wall that I definitely need to cover, and I am deciding the position of the frames to give me a symmetrical view, and also to be sure that I cannot see the parts that I shouldn't. And this is it. I finally finished this. It took longer than I thought it would. I would say probably a couple of months. I kind of lost track. The first part really taught me quite a few good lessons, especially not to buy timber from box stores. But the second part was absolute fun. I had a blast creating all these dioramas and just going with it without a plan and without any sort of stress. And it turned out beautifully. I'm really happy with it. My wife is also happy, and my friends have complimented me. I think I achieved the Japanese look that I was after, and there's not too much in the face. I don't think it's too tacky. So, okay, I hope you like it too. And well, if you did, please subscribe. Bye, see you next time.